Part 76. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 751. On the execution platform, the warring States Marshal observed the battle between Whitebeard and Garp. Obviously, Garp's strength is not something that Whitebeard can defeat in a short time. In fact, Newgate has never defeated Garp in a real sense during his career on the sea for decades. This naval hero. Even though he was once called the strongest man. If Garp had ever really lost to anyone, maybe it was only Roger? But that was not a failure in terms of strength, but as a destined opponent, Roger became the pirate king under Garp's eyes. From this point of view, in this kind of competition, Garp was naturally at a disadvantage. In terms of strength alone, Garp has been traveling all over the world for so many years as a navy, and he has never lost to anyone. Even Orgrim has never defeated Garp head-on. It is said that the three generals of the navy are the strongest in the navy, but in fact, Orgrim has always guessed that Garp is the ceiling of the navy's combat power. Garp at full strength is undoubtedly quite terrifying. Even Newgate, the Whitebeard, tried to repel him several times but failed to do so. Powerful power continuously overflowed from the two of them. The fight was quite fierce, but they couldn't tell who was better. Marineford was in chaos at this time. Except for a small part of the navy under the execution platform, the rest of the navy had all participated in the war and were fighting fiercely with the evil pirates. After looking away from Garp and Newgate, the warring States Marshal's brows knitted together again. It is obvious that the war has now entered a white-hot state. The two sides are entangled and fighting fiercely. And even though this moment has come, Khazgaro's Orgrim has not yet appeared. This even made the warring States Marshal feel that he had no intention or idea of participating in the war in Marineford. Will Orgrim go do other things? Are you anxious? Very impatient, right? The opponent you really value has not appeared, Tiki suddenly said, with a teasing smile on his lips. He has calmed down. Although after his father appeared on the scene and when so many brothers fought bravely to save him, Teach did feel a lot of regret in his heart. But at this time, these thoughts were suppressed by him. The matter has come to this, and there is nothing he can do to undo it, so in Teach's opinion, the best outcome now is for Orgrim to keep his promise and give him the dark fruit. Dad was also able to safely evacuate Marineford Island. If he could go back alive, he would definitely honor his father and strive to become the heir that his father wanted to see. Let's carry forward the Whitebeard pirates. When death is imminent, do you talk more? Marshal Warring States glanced at Tiki and said. Then let me tell you some news that will make you even more frightened after hearing it. Thief, ha 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 ha, this war has been planned by Master Chui from the beginning. Do you think it was your navy that caught me to start it? Of war? No. It was Master Chui who asked me to be caught. This was a deal between me and him, Teach said with an evil smile flashing in his eyes. Marshal Warring States was stunned for a moment. He didn't know whether what Tiki said was true or false, but if it was true, this shows that Orgrim definitely has other plans. If he didn't come here, what big thing did he do? That kind of thing is more important than war? For a moment, the Warring States Marshal felt that Orgrim should attack the Holy Land Marijoa, right? But soon, the Warring States Marshal came back to his senses and said in a deep voice, can you deceive me by saying such things? Will you tell me such a thing? Are you not afraid of Whitebeard knowing about it? If this is really the case, if Whitebeard knows the twists and turns, he will probably be so angry that he vomits blood. Tiki smiled disdainfully and said calmly, you don't understand Dad at all. From the time he appeared, from the time I felt repentant, these things are nothing. What's more, you will Dad believe what you say. If you tell him, he will at best think that you are trying to provoke a strategic alliance between the Whitebeard pirates and the Warhammer pirates. Looking at Senguo's silent expression, Tiki laughed again and said, ha 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 ha, thief, Generalissimo, whether it is strength or planning, in my opinion, you are no match for that gentleman, not really with him. You don't need to say anything more. I know better than you how difficult that bastard is. How many years do you think I have been fighting with him? Marshal Sengoku interrupted Teach directly. Yes, he, Sengoku, has been fighting with that bastard Orgrim for more than 20 years. How could he not know how difficult that guy is? To be honest, at this time at this moment, Marshal Warring States already somewhat believed Teach's words. From the beginning, the Navy had fallen into Orgrim's rhythm. But he still couldn't figure it out. What on earth did Orgrim do? There is a cognitive blind spot. There is no so-called Lord Yim in Marshal Warring States consciousness. Naturally, it is impossible to deduce what Orgrim is doing. Asshole, what are you doing? The Warring States Marshal murmured in his heart, feeling increasingly bad. And just as his thoughts were swirling in his mind, suddenly, the fortress of justice behind him was exploded by a powerful impact. At the same time, a black shadow hit the steps of the execution platform at an extremely fast speed. This collision was beyond everyone's expectations. Even the Warring States Marshal didn't react. Why was he stabbed in the back? The pillars of the tall execution platform were instantly broken, and under the spotlight, the execution platform collapsed. In a moment, Marshal Warring States and Teach were buried directly under the rubble, and the remaining two executioners did not know whether they were alive or dead. This sudden change shocked everyone on the battlefield. For a moment, the noisy battlefield calmed down for a moment. The Navy and pirates stopped in perfect agreement. Execution platform has been breached. Countless Marines thought this in their hearts. But upon closer inspection, it seems that this is not the case. At this moment, among the ruins of the execution platform, a big hand stretched out and pushed aside the rocks that were pressing on it. After being injected by countless people in Marineford, a slightly embarrassed, but very strong and brave figure crawled out of the ruins. He has sharp black short hair, a rather strong build, his upper body is shirtless, and there is a tattoo of the Warhammer Pirates logo on his back. He is wearing black trousers and a pair of high-tech military boots, and has a resolute face. The moment this guy stood up, he was recognized by countless people. The Lord of the Night, Hosgarot Orgrim. The true enemy of justice. The evil king. In fact, it is not just the Warring States Marshal who is thinking about what Orgrim is doing, and how he will appear if he appears. Many people are also thinking about how this big boss, who has not shown up for a long time, will intervene in this war. I have imagined many ways of appearing, falling from the sky, breaking through the ice, or something like that. But no one would have thought that he would explode from the Fortress of Justice in Marineford. And as soon as he came out, he directly knocked down the execution platform. The appearance of this King of the Night really surprised everyone. What's even more surprising is that he seemed to be slightly injured and a little embarrassed. Yes, Orgrim's current appearance is indeed a bit embarrassing. There was a bruised and black fist mark on his abdomen. At this time, he could still feel the pain coming from him. After taking this powerful blow, some blood spilled from the corner of Orgrim's mouth. He was also a little confused at this time. In his mind, he should have smashed the little girl's head with one hammer, killed her, and then found a cool and handsome way to log onto the Marineford battlefield to boost the morale of the pirates. It would be best if he could give his old friend, the Warring States Marshal, a big surprise. But in the end, he fell with the hammer, but before he could blow the little girl's head off, the little girl came first and punched him in the abdomen. The powerful force instantly knocked him out, causing the scene just now. For a moment, he wondered if this little girl was Garp in disguise. Why is it so powerful? Is there a hidden ace in the Navy headquarters? Although he only took one blow, a person of Orgrim's level could already feel a lot of things through this blow. The first point is that the little girl who punched him is definitely very strong, quite powerful, and is undoubtedly a top master. At this moment, Orgrim still had not guessed the identity of this little girl, only thinking that she was the Navy's hidden ace. He stretched out his hand and wiped the corners of his mouth to wipe away the spilled blood. Underestimating the enemy and being careless, Orgrim was completely defenseless and took this powerful blow firmly. There was indeed damage, but it was completely impossible to say that Orgrim suffered a serious setback during the beating, and it was nothing serious. It's just a little painful. Pulling the doom hammer up from the ruins, Orgrim moved his neck left and right, making a clicking sound, and looked through the ruins to the Fortress of Justice in Marineford. The little girl also happened to walk to the place where Orgrim broke through the wall and was looking over here. Her eyes were still full of surprise. It was as if Orgrim was still able to stand up vigorously after taking this punch, which made her quite satisfied. What's the origin? Orgrim frowned slightly and thought. But before he could speak, brilliant golden light suddenly scattered under the ruins. The next moment, a huge golden palm broke through the ruins and slapped Orgrim. Orgrim did not resist anything. He stepped on his foot and pulled back a certain distance. While dodging the blow, a smile appeared on his face. Gee ha 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 ha, Marshal of the Warring States period, long time no see. I didn't expect us to say hello in this way, Orgrim laughed. Yes, that huge golden palm was none other than the Warring States Marshal. He had emerged from the ruins in the posture of a golden Buddha. A look of anger. Orgrim, how could you do this? The Marshal of the Warring States period asked angrily. He was confused. Why did his lifelong enemy explode out of the Fortress of Justice? I don't know, I thought he was a collaborator with the enemy during the Warring States period. It's hard to explain in one sentence. I don't want to get out of it in this embarrassing posture, Orgrim waved his hand and said with a helpless attitude. Marshal Warring States glanced back from the corner of his eye, and naturally saw the young girl. He was also a little surprised. Who is this? Where did it come from? Do we still have such strong people in our naval headquarters? Can one blow knock back Orgrim? Orgrim had a vicious eye, and he instantly got some clues from the Warring States Marshal's micro-expression. Then, he was very surprised and asked Warring States, you don't know her? She is not from your navy. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 752. The Warring States Marshal really didn't know that little girl. But at this moment, he smiled and said to Orgrim, that's right, I don't know her. It was a normal sentence, but it was because of this smile that Orgrim was not sure. Got it, this old Yinbai from the Warring States period won't deceive me, will he? But this is just a momentary thought. Now that the matter is over, the answer doesn't matter anymore. Cool la 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 la, Orgrim, you were secretive and didn't show up for a long time, just to show off like this? Newgate laughed loudly. Garp and him both stopped at this time. They even distanced themselves in a tacit understanding and paid attention to Orgrim. It has to be said that although Orgrim his appearance was very embarrassing, but indeed, whether he appeared flying or crawling, his identity was here. As soon as he appeared, countless masters on the battlefield stopped. This is deterrence. I didn't want to either. I was planning to do something big, but the real owner didn't come. Orgrim smiled and waved his hands. Just when Orgrim wanted to have a few words with some of the big guys around him, a sudden cold light flashed through, and a murderous aura instantly enveloped him. Without thinking, Orgrim raised the warhammer in his hand and blocked it to his side. Sure enough, in the next moment, a sharp blade struck directly on Orgrim's hammer handle. The fierce momentum made Orgrim unable to open his eyes. Hey, you damn woman, you didn't even say hello, Orgrim cursed. The person who took action was none other than the Chief Inspector of the Navy headquarters, Jun. This is a battlefield, Jun said coldly. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his leg to kick out. Orgrim's reaction speed was also very fast. He pushed his knee forward and directly blocked the inside of Jun's kick, unable to let it go. She kicked out, and at the same time, the two of them used their feet together, and a domineering confrontation broke out in an instant. Suddenly, Orgrim appeared and collapsed the execution platform. After chatting for only 3 or 5 words, Jun took a strong shot. Interrupting everyone's thoughts, the war is about to break out. Although Jun is powerful, in terms of strength, Orgrim definitely has a huge advantage. While wrestling with his feet, Orgrim exerts force in his hands, and the war hammer, the handle of the hammer pressed against Jun's blade, and he opened it violently. As he opened the blade, along the direction drawn by the hammer handle, Orgrim's elbow struck with great strength Jun's head. In this instant, Jun saw a faint flicker of light on Orgrim's elbow, which was a concentrated and undissipated impact. In a moment, pink hair grew under Jun's feet. Fluffy, like a rabbit on the run, not only withdrew from the struggle with Orgrim, but also turned into a pink shadow, dodged backwards, and avoided Orgrim's elbow attack. Tyrannosaurus charging elbow. Orgrim shouted loudly. When his elbow missed, a powerful shockwave instantly erupted from his arm. This blow actually hit the warring states marshal. His big golden hand with a claw in the void, he managed to catch the invisible shockwave, pinched it hard, and exploded it in the air. At the same moment, Jun, who had landed on the ground, kicked his feet, and turned towards Orgrim like a spring. Bully again. Judeo-style frost dance, Jun shouted low, and the Jinpura in his hand brought a touch of frosty air, and slashed Orgrim's head straight. The speed was too fast, and the distance was not too far, but what Orgrim was holding was still heavy. Weapons, it's hard to dodge for a while. With a heartache, Orgrim stamped his foot violently, and an extremely strong impact exploded instantly. The circular shockwave spread out at 360 degrees without any blind spots, drawing Marshal Sengoku and Jun into it and forcing them back a long way. At the same time, the ruins of the execution platform were also opened up. As soon as Tikai showed his head, he was directly carried away by the shockwave. With a strong blow, the two masters, Marshal Sengoku and Jun, were forced back, but after standing firm, Marshal Sengoku's eyes flashed with excitement. Orgrim, as expected, you don't have that strong crushing power during the day, Marshal Warring States opened his mouth and shouted. The test was indeed just a test. These two tests allowed Marshal Warring States to find some flaws. Although Orgrim is called the ultimate strongest, in fact, at least during the day, he was not strong enough to make top players like them feel unrivaled pressure. Orgrim grinned and said with a smile, the old guy is really a thief, but you're right, at least during the day, I was still a little behind, and I couldn't get over that hurdle. As soon as he finished speaking, an impact force erupted from Orgrim's feet. He grabbed the war hammer and hit the guy Senguo. He hit his head with the hammer. Marshal Senguo turned into a golden Buddha. He was also tough and could not hide. He hid, and pushed up with a slap, as if he was trying to grab Orgrim's war hammer. The strong impact force instantly burst out from the war hammer, and the Warring States Marshal had a determined look in his eyes, and his domineering energy suddenly burst out, directly entered the second stage. With the power of the Phantom Beast species and the second stage of armed domineering, he just withstood Orgrim's blow. The explosion of power collision, from where the golden palm and the war hammer collided, exploded out. Without wrestling, his foot slipped, the huge golden Buddha turned sideways, and slapped his palm down, directly changing the trajectory of Orgrim's war hammer, and the war hammer rubbed his arm. Failed. At the same time that the hammer hit the ground, Orgrim kicked the golden belly of the Warring States Marshal, causing him to stagger. Cap, after the Warring States Marshal took 2 steps back to stand firm, he shouted loudly. Coming, Garp responded quickly. At the same moment, the naval hero and the navy marshal chose to exchange opponents. This is also something that Garp and Sengoku had discussed long ago. In terms of ability alone, Sengoku, the great marshal, he was restrained to death by that guy Orgrim. His top-notch strength could be used at most 70% in front of Orgrim. The giant Buddha form of the Phantom Beast species gave him extremely strong defensive power at most. He didn't dare to use attack methods, such as shock waves, in front of Orgrim. Therefore, Sengoku had already discussed with Garp before the war. If this situation really happened, they would exchange opponents. Sengoku went to hammer Whitebeard, and Garp came to fight against Orgrim. But Orgrim obviously did not intend to let the two of them complete the connection so easily. The moment Sengoku was about to move, a light flashed in Orgrim's eyes. The warhammer in his hand brought out a hot breath, as if the surrounding air was distorted by the high temperature. However, just when Orgrim was about to take action, the frosty air instantly suppressed the surrounding temperature. Go down. The figure of Jun appeared in front of Orgrim. At this time, she had transformed into a fluffy bunny girl state. As a phantom beast, every rabbit hair on her body seemed to be radiating outwards. With the power of the cold moon, the famous sword Kimpira had already sheathed it. At the moment when Orgrim was about to swing the hammer, Jun punched the elbow of Orgrim's arm. Joint technique. It is a fighting technique. A very common one. It has a partial effect and can block the opponent's movements by hitting the opponent's joints. Although Jun's figure is not very powerful, Jun is a serious Phantom Beast type ability user. It's still the kind that has long been awakened. In the beastly state, his slender figure is pregnant with extremely powerful power. This blow really interrupted Orgrim's offensive. Therefore, Orgrim the hammer missed and failed to stop Sengoku, the naval marshal. As if he had seized the opportunity, while Orgrim was holding a heavy weapon and was unable to use it in close combat, Jun backhanded him and hit him again. Orgrim's chest, while punching, a knee hit the inside of Orgrim's knee, as if he wanted to block Orgrim's pace. A sharp look flashed in Orgrim's eyes, Reem's hand slipped. Depending on the weight of the hammerhead and handle, the long and narrow hammer handle slid down directly and reached Orgrim's chest. He accurately blocked Jun's punch. At the same time, he lowered his waist. Like a horse stance, spread his legs outward, and blocked Jun's kick very neatly. The moment these two sets of movements were completed, Orgrim's body center of gravity happened to be downward. With this trend, one head directly hit Jun's chest. There was no intention of showing mercy at all. Even in this headbutt, Orgrim used a powerful domineering force. When he went down with one head, he felt the softness first. After all, it was in the chest. Go up, and then follow with explosive force, and directly hit Jun with his head. His eyes were black, and a trace of blood could not help but flow out from the corner of his mouth. His figure was blown away like a cannonball. This is the gap between the top masters. Even if Jun caught it, she struck first, but Orgrim's series of fierce counterattacks injured her and sent her flying. But Orgrim himself was not seriously injured. But before the hammer could be raised, a powerful force punched Orgrim on the head. Fortunately, he was protected by the armed domineering force. At the same time he felt the pressure and powerful force coming in, Orgrim changed his steps, one forward and one backward, like a bull, holding on to the force that was almost overturned. Figure. Yes, it was the hero Garp who punched Orgrim on the head. Orgrim has not had a real fight with Garp for many years. In other words, the two of them actually didn't have much of a bond. When they first went out to sea, Orgrim bumped into Garp's hand. After several times, even if they met, he never had a fight with Garp. I didn't expect that they hadn't fought against each other for so many years. When they came into contact today, they punched Garp on the head first. Iron Fist Garp is also Garp's nickname. His fists are one of the most powerful in the world today. Almost all of his abilities rely on his own fists. The moment the fist collided with the head, an armed and domineering confrontation erupted. The space was shattered by the release of these two forces. Dark invisible lightning crackled around the two of them. Orgrim felt Garp's strong power and sighed in his heart. Garp, on the other hand, was a little shocked. His fists were so refined that many powerful masters could not catch them, let alone catch them with their heads. The last person who was so stubborn, Garp remembers, was the guy from Qingqiao. As a result, he punched his head flat. Now, Orgrim actually caught his fist with his head. What surprised him even more was that the reception didn't seem to be stressful. "Drink," Garp shouted violently, and the power in his hand exploded again, and he just knocked back Orgrim. There was no way, after all, Orgrim's head-to-head punch was really a bit hasty. Originally, he just used this move. He just defeated Jun, and was attacked by Garp. The old strength has been exhausted and the new strength has not yet been unleashed. It is inevitable that he will be repulsed by Garp. After taking a few steps back and steadying his body, Orgrim smashed the warhammer on the ground and stared at Garp. Garp did not dare to act rashly for a moment. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 753. The pause in the scene lasted only a moment. After observing for a while, Garp took action again, exerting force under his feet, and his strong figure crashed directly into Orgrim. His armed domination made his fists shine black. With a flash of light in his eyes, Orgrim did not move on the spot, but took a punching posture. When Garp punched him, he also punched out fiercely. The wind of the fist blasted the air, and the strong impact force burst out instantly, like a tiger roaring and a dragon roaring. The two fists collided, and they were full of energy. Perhaps in terms of strength, Garp was not inferior to Orgrim. But in this blow, Orgrim still used a strong posture to knock him away. I saw that the surging impact force, as it overflowed, pressed the ground and sank for a while. Garp rolled in the air and punched twice, his feet landed on the ground, and the ground instantly collapsed. Only then did he vent the impact force eroding in his body. Call, Garp exhaled slowly. Although he did not suffer any injuries, there was still a faint sting on his fist. At the same time, he took the lead in launching a fierce attack, but was knocked away by Orgrim's blow. It looked really embarrassing. But this old guy doesn't have much shame. In fact, this attack can be regarded as his test to measure how difficult Orgrim is. It turns out that it is very difficult. One or two of them moved their hands without even saying hello. Do you really think that I bought this reputation as the strongest from that old guy with white beard? Orgrim said coldly. As his words fell, the aura on Orgrim gradually rose. Then, the ground trembled slightly, and the strong impact force condensed into lines of energy that seemed to have turned into substance. Lines were constantly swimming outside Orgrim's body. Garp and Jun looked at Orgrim very cautiously, as if they were guarding against Orgrim's sudden attack. Boom! There was a loud noise, and in the distance, the collision between the warring States Marshal and Newgate brought a trace of aftermath. At this moment, Orgrim moved. He exerted force under his feet, and the ground immediately collapsed. The figure rushed towards Garp at an extremely fast speed. It was so fast that it even pulled out a phantom. The heavy hammer of destruction seemed to have been forgotten by him and stood there. But everyone knows that Orgrim, who has not picked up the warhammer, is obviously serious. Shocked in his heart, Garp crossed his arms without thinking too much, and with a domineering attitude, he blocked himself in front of him with a parrying gesture. As soon as this action was completed, Orgrim's fistful of impact hit the intersection of his two arms. He pressed his arms inward first, and was pressed against his chest by Orgrim's punch. The ground beneath his feet collapsed again, and the gravel didn't have time to explode before it was directly transformed into a powerful force by the impact. The power was so strong that Garp almost couldn't open his eyes. The feet first sank into the ground, and then the ground was peeled off. The powerful impact, after a momentary pause, exploded out with an even more powerful posture. Garp's sturdy figure was still unable to block the punch. When Orgrim rounded his fist, he was also knocked away. Before Orgrim could adjust his posture, he heard a sweet shout. "Jump on the eagle." When the sound came, the person arrived, and before he could parry, Orgrim's eyes flashed, and he yelled on the spot, "Iron Black Gold." Jun's powerful kick knocked out the air, and kicked Orgrim hard on the shoulder. The powerful force directly defeated the shockwave on Orgrim's body. A plow mark was made under his feet, and Orgrim blocked Jun's kick with his shoulder. As soon as he turned his head, frost and cold air hit his face. Although it was not harmful, it was extremely insulting. Yun was simply exerting all his abilities. But Orgrim felt that as soon as he turned his head, he was greeted by a wave of athlete's foot. With a cruel look in his eyes, he struck Jun's calf with a backhand blow. If the blow was real, he might be able to break one of Jun's legs in one blow. In Jun's beastly state, his reaction speed was greatly enhanced. In an instant, his feet exerted force, and with Orgrim as the force-bearing point, he quickly kicked back. Orgrim's hand sword missed, and Jun's feet landed on the ground at the same time. He lowered his body downwards, put one hand on Jinpura at his waist, and took out the cold light from its sheath. One sword style Zanjutsu. This blow does not have the frosty power that Jun is used to, but it is full of sharpness. Before the knife reaches, Orgrim has already felt a threat. This is not due to his hard-forged iron skills. A slash that can be blocked. If you can't block it, you have to avoid it. Instinctively, you take a step back. The tip of the knife brushed against Orgrim's abdomen, and the cold light shot out faintly, slashed through the air. It broke the muscles of Orgrim's abdomen, tore some blood skin, and brought up a bloodline that was neither deep nor shallow. As soon as his back foot landed, Garp had already rushed back and took action again. Grabbing Orgrim when Grim was retreating, Garp was uncharacteristically not punching. Instead, he wrapped his arms around Orgrim's waist and took advantage of Orgrim's retreat. Unsteady, he just put Orgrim's abdomen on his shoulders and lifted him up. He punched Garp on the back with his backhand, and Garp spit out a stream of blood from his mouth with a backhand punch, but Garp couldn't. But he didn't let go. He swooped forward with his feet and hit the ground with Orgrim. Obviously, Garp's close combat was quite powerful. The two of them landed together, with Orgrim at the bottom and he was stuck. Pu was on top. The movement was very sharp. He took advantage of the situation and pressed his knees directly on both sides of Orgrim's shoulders. He pressed Orgrim's arms with his legs. Then, Garp punched hard and hit on the bridge of Orgrim's nose. His arms were restrained and he was unable to exert force immediately. Orgrim's head was completely defenseless. As soon as his dark-armed domineering energy gathered, he was directly punched by Garp. The pain dissipated, and the feeling of broken nose bones, first a soreness, and then tears and mucus flowed out, mixed with bright red blood. It was not that. Orgrim was beaten and cried. In fact, the bridge of the nose was injured, and the tears it will flow out instinctively. Orgrim also used this method of hitting the bridge of the nose before, which made many masters cry. Garp's punch was so powerful and heavy that the back of Orgrim's head took the force and crushed the ground directly. Often when top players really start fighting, there aren't many bells and whistles. Instead, they have a low-end feel that easily turns into a street fight. At this moment, didn't the blow Garp pressed on Orgrim have this feeling? Just when Garp was about to grab Orgrim's neck and punch him again, Orgrim used his feet, raised his knees inward, and hit Garp's lower back twice. It knocked Garp staggering, and at the same time, the constraints on Orgrim's shoulders were also released. "Are you an old bastard?" Orgrim cursed angrily as he pulled away his arms, and grabbed the back of Garp's neck with his backhand. Before Garp could break free, Orgrim ignored the injury on the bridge of his nose, pushed Garp's head down while holding a bloody head, and hit him ferociously. The second injury caused Orgrim immense pain, but he was also a ruthless man. The bridge of Garp's nose was broken when he hit him head-on, and blood and tears splattered everywhere. Both of their eyes were a little dark at this time and they were dizzy. But Orgrim's physique is undoubtedly much stronger than Garp's. In the blink of an eye, his head is much clearer. Just when Orgrim seizes this flaw in Garp's stupidity, he is ready to give him a cruel blow. At that moment, Jun's figure descended from the sky, and with a cold light in his hand, the Jinpura stabbed straight at Orgrim without any hesitation. It seems like Orgrim and Garp are being linked together. But Orgrim would not doubt Jun's accuracy at all. If her sword really fell, Garp would be sure that there would be no problem at all, and he would still get the sword in vain. Lying on the ground, Orgrim didn't have time to think about it. He kicked out directly. A powerful shockwave instantly erupted from the toes and hit Jun's blade, forcing her to change direction. In the blink of an eye, the blade scraped holding Orgrim's armpit. He instantly sank into the broken ground. Clamping his arms inward, Orgrim clamped Jun's Kimpira. At this time, Garp just came back to his senses from the dazed state without thinking too much. Hugged Orgrim's head with both arms, and tightly wrapped around Orgrim's body. A powerful impact was emitted directly from Orgrim, but Garp, with his arm-domineering energy covering his whole body, managed to withstand the close impact. His arms and legs, they are all pressing down on Orgrim, and he will not come down even if he is dead or alive. Don't look at it, this style of play is quite ugly, just like a rogue playing hooligan. In fact, this is a tactic that many experts from the Navy headquarters have studied many battle plans against Orgrim and finally determined. It's not pretty, and it doesn't have the style of top experts, but it's very effective. As long as there are people who can withstand Orgrim's explosive power, entangle Orgrim, and other masters take action, it will become relatively easy to deal with Orgrim. As for Garp, it is obvious that he is a tough guy with a top-notch domineering defense who can effectively entangle Orgrim's dogskin plaster. Orgrim really didn't expect that the top masters of the Navy headquarters would be so shameless. They were locked by Garp. Make every effort. This technique of locking people is really professional. I wonder how many masters Garp has practiced in the Navy. Finally, with the advantage of strength, he turned over and pinned Garp under him, but before he could break free from Garp's locking technique, Jun also locked Orgrim from behind. Her arms were wrapped around Orgrim's neck from behind, and her legs were wrapped around Orgrim's waist from left to right. Her hairy arms were constantly exerting force, and the muscles were surging in her arms. This damn woman wants to break Orgrim's neck directly from behind. Orgrim's face turned red, feeling suffocated. But he did not lose his resistance. Suddenly, there was a ruthless look in his eyes, and the power of awakening burst out from him. This time, neither Garp nor Jun could lock Orgrim any longer. The strong force of the impact was simply irresistible. The two of them were all blown away from Orgrim in one breath. It blew up. This also really stung Orgrim's heart. He originally thought that with his current strength, he would be able to suppress two top masters without using the power of awakening. As a result, Garp and Jun used this rogue strategy to force him to use his awakened power in such a short period of time. Sure enough, these veteran top masters cannot be underestimated. Especially after these bastards become shameless, it is even more terrifying. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 754. In the distance, at the cave opened by Orgrim in Marineford's Fortress of Justice, Lord Im looked at Orgrim's embarrassed appearance and couldn't help laughing. Ha 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 ha, interesting, so interesting. Are these people doing acrobatics? Master Yumo laughed so hard. After laughing, she shook her head again. How long has it been since she laughed like this? 10 years? Or longer? This world is really boring. The same is true for people. Her long life has made her tired of this boring world. And that Husgarot Orgrim may be the only one that makes her interesting in recent decades, or even hundreds of years. The little guy. The bald king was standing behind Lord Im at this time, not daring to say a word, and his face was even quite pale. Everything changed so fast, and he didn't know what to do at this time. To deal with this situation, Lord Im knocked Orgrim away with one blow, although he did not continue to fight after that. But the bald king knew very well that Lord Im was definitely extremely powerful, and he might be able to do it with just one hand. He pinched himself to death. He didn't dare to run, so he could only stand here obediently. Fortunately, Lord Im's interest seemed to be piqued by Orgrim. So far, he has not said a word to him. After watching Orgrim use stronger power to finally break up the Navy's shameless tactics, Lord Im's eyes lit up and he said, "Sure enough, he can be stronger." After finishing speaking, Lord Im turned his head and glanced at the bald king. He frowned slightly, as if he was thinking about something, and then asked as if he couldn't remember, "What is your name?" The famous 5 old stars, who claim to be the most powerful, in the eyes of Lord Im, seem to be just a small character who doesn't even bother to remember his name. The bald king swallowed his saliva and said nervously, "I'm here." Chaffee. Before he finished speaking, Lord Im seemed too lazy to listen, waving his hands and saying, "No need to say it, I can't remember it anyway, so I'll just call you Little Baldy. I am a mighty 5 old star, you call me Little Bald Man?" The bald king felt very aggrieved. "Even if I was bald, can you please make it smaller? After all, I am already several decades old." But looking at this Lord Im, who seems to be only in his 20s, the bald king can't show his age no matter what. After all, the person in front of me is hundreds of years old. You and that Husgarot Orgrim are in the same group, right? It's really strange. The Navy is obviously a direct descendant of the world government. Why do you want to get involved with Orgrim? Master Im said with a smile. It seemed that she didn't notice anything, but there was a cold light in her eyes. The bald king seemed to feel the pressure and did not dare to speak for a while. Master Im didn't seem to be prepared to really listen to him. After a slight pause, he said softly, "Maybe it's because it has nothing to do with the Navy, right? This matter between you and him has nothing to do with the Navy. The Navy is not your goal, so, it's me, right?" The bald king had cold sweat on his forehead and his legs were trembling slightly. "Ha ha 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 ha, sure enough, in fact, a few years ago, I felt that something was wrong with the 5 of you." Master Yuma waved his hand and said very casually. This shocked the bald king. He did not doubt the authenticity of what Master Yuma said, and there was no need to tell lies. However, the more this happened, the more he was surprised. The bald king felt fear. "Lord Im, did you already know this? You are not the first ones to have this idea. The 5 old stars, on the surface, are the highest power of the world government, but secretly, they have to kowtow to me. You who have tasted the taste of power and the highest position, how about you? How can you be loyal? The 5 old stars of the past dynasties all have thoughts of rebellion. The difference lies in whether they do it or not. This is normal." Master Yuma said very calmly. "You are either lucky or unlucky. During the period when you are in power, you have a talented person like Orgrim who is the strongest at the top, and he is really willing to cooperate with you. Ha 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 ha, this is too much. It's accidental. After all, I only thought before that you have the courage to think but not the courage to do it." Lord Im laughed and said. The tone seemed very relaxed. She seemed not to care at all about other people's betrayal of her. "Maybe she's big-hearted, Or maybe she doesn't take these people seriously. It's like humans don't care if ants betray themselves. Lord Im's words are undoubtedly accurate. If Orgrim hadn't appeared, the 5 old stars might have some ideas in their minds, but if they were killed, they wouldn't dare to really rebel against Lord Im. The bald king did not dare to speak, but Lord Im seemed to be in a lively conversation. Therefore, he didn't care about the fear of the bald king, and still said to himself, actually, probably more than 200 years ago, I have always had a question that I wanted to ask you, the highest authority. The bald king then hurriedly said, Master Im, please ask. Why, you will think of many ways to overthrow me openly or covertly, but no one is willing. Ask me if you can abdicate. Lord Im asked with a smile. The bald king was stunned for a moment, and then instinctively said, of course it's because he doesn't dare. Oh? Lord Im raised his eyebrows, and then said a little boringly, this is what's boring about you. You dare to commit such a substantial betrayal, but you don't dare to ask me what I think because of fear. Should I say you are bold or timid? After all, that's it, boring. The bald king felt for a moment that what Lord Im said made sense. They all dared to collude with Orgrim to do such a thing, but they didn't dare to ask, are they brave or timid? In fact, I have no interest in it for a long time. What kind of king of the world is this? 200 years ago, I have been waiting for you losers to speak, but so far, all I have been met with is disappointment. Lord Im said softly. The bald king was stunned again. He didn't know whether what Lord Im said was true or false, but it seemed that there was no need to tell lies to him. In other words, if they could muster the courage to face Yumu directly, Lord Mu, maybe you don't need to do these messy things to get rid of the shackles on your body? What the hell? But, the opportunity is given to you, but you are useless. When you reach this point, you have no choice anymore. Just look forward to it. I will not kill you now, because it will be even more boring, Lord Im said softly. She looked at Orgrim again and said with a raised corner of her mouth, you have chosen a good partner. Compared with incompetent people like you, that guy is bold enough and strong enough. More importantly, yes, he has ambition in his eyes, which is constantly expanding. He dares to think and do it. This is an interesting guy, exactly the same as when I was. Orgrim's ambitions are really growing. At first, he just wanted to be a big pirate. Later, he wanted to be the top pirate. And then, he wanted to be the pirate king. With every step he takes, his ambition will expand even more. Nowadays, he is not only satisfied with being a pirate, he even wants to infiltrate the highest power class of the world government and make his family a celestial dragon. Just tell me how swollen he is. And Orgrim not only dared to think, he actually dared to do it. It is precisely because of this that Lord Im is very interested in him. So, just think of it as an interesting gamble after a long absence, little bald man, you have already placed your bets on that guy, and I have always only bet on myself. Let us see who can win. If I lose, then congratulations to you, on the throne of the void. No one will ever sit down again. If I win. When Lord Im said this, his tone paused slightly. Then, an indifferent look flashed in her eyes, and she whispered, all of you must die. She has lived for more than 800 years, and she has experienced countless changes in the era. The coalition forces broke up the once huge free kingdom, formed a world government, and 20 kings gradually died, and she seized the supreme authority. However, nothing can be compared with time. The power and status she was most passionate about in the past, the feeling of being at the top of the world, are now boring to her, and she never wants to experience it again. In the past hundreds of years, she has never stayed in the so-called Holy Land of Marijoa. On the contrary, she wandered around the world and experienced different lives. She worked as a businessman, a teacher, learned swordsmanship, and even experienced the life of a pirate in a certain era. Share. Even the navy, she had joined. The long period of time gave her enough energy to experience these things one by one. But in the end, it was still not worth the time. It seems that everything is boring. She began to think back and reflect, why did it become like this? Is it my fault? No, it's not my fault. If you are as proud as I'm, how can you feel that you are in the wrong? Finally, she figured out that it was the world's fault. There was no one in this world that interested her. The one who could make her long, decaying life exciting again. Whether it's an opponent, a friend, or any other position, there has never been such a person. The world is so vast, but in the end, she seems to be the only unique person. This has been the case for 800 years. It's the world's fault, not hers. It wasn't until more than 20 years ago that she felt the times had changed. She was very familiar with this feeling. Whenever there was such a change in the sea, countless relatively interesting people would emerge. These people are all called lights by her, and every time, she will extinguish these lights one by one. This can be regarded as adding a little bit of fun to her lonely and long time. At the same time, when extinguishing these lights, she was also wanting to choose and see if there was anyone who could make her life exciting again. However, several eras have passed, and no such person has appeared. Whether it was Rox, the previous pirate overlord, or some other force, there was no such thing. Originally, in this era, the little guy named Roger interested her very much. But in the end, he died and extinguished his own light. This also made him lose some interest in this era. The light she was most optimistic about went out on its own. I thought that was it, but, Hosgarot Orgrim appears. In this era, no one can cover up the brilliance of others. This is an era of shining stars, but there is no doubt that Khazgro Orgrim is undoubtedly the most dazzling one in this era in the past 20 years. When Orgrim became the ultimate strongest, he claimed to have reached the end of his power and stood on the other side. Lord Im finally became interested in Orgrim. She suddenly discovered that this guy was even more interesting than Roger. He was even the most interesting person among the countless people she had seen in the past 800 years. But, if that's all, it's nothing more than fun. But, that guy claims to have reached his limit. This is the only thing that makes Im's heart flutter. It's the limit, isn't she at her limit? Standing at the end of strength, reaching the other side, woman. I'm very curious about who is stronger. This may make her life more exciting. Therefore, she came to Marineford and contacted Orgrim personally. Whether it is strong or not has not been fully reflected yet, but it is interesting, it is really interesting. Maybe it's good that my life can be so long, isn't it? A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 755. A strong wind came, and the powerful punch seemed to burst the air. Orgrim had just escaped Jun's kick, but Garp's punch had already landed in front of Orgrim. I have to say that this guy Garp is really a bit perverted. He has no ability at all, but these fists alone are enough for him to roam the world. His iron fist really knows who can eat it. No wonder that guy Roger ran away from him when he saw him before, without even hitting him. Thinking about it now, with Roger's sickly physical condition in the later period, he would probably die on the spot after being punched a few times by Garp. He couldn't dodge, but Orgrim didn't want to be punched in the chest by Garp. After receiving a few punches before, his chest ached, maybe his ribs were about to break. He took a step back with his left foot, tilted his body, and blocked Garp's fist with his strong arm. The next second, the punch caused Orgrim to stumble and take another step back. The dull crashing sound was like thunder in the thick clouds. Even though the muscles in Orgrim's arms were quite strong, he still felt great pain, and his arms were even a little stiff. But just as he took the step back, the ground collapsed, releasing the pressure in his body instantly. At the same time, Orgrim also grabbed Garp's arm. With a sudden force, he forced Garp to take a step closer to him. The distance between the two people was close to each other in an instant, and the gap between them was only about the size of two fists. At the same time, this time, Orgrim's shoulder was also pressed against Garp's chest. Originally, Orgrim wanted to use the Iron Mountain Reliance move that he learned from his master when he fought with Zifa in Imperial. At such a close range, if you lean in suddenly and use your shoulders and elbows as an offensive, the lethality is really powerful, a bit similar to the so-called inch strength. But just as Orgrim leaned forward, Garp, an old fighter, seemed to realize what Orgrim wanted to do. Without saying a word, he rushed forward and pressed his body against Orgrim before he could exert his strength. On Orgrim's arm, one foot was also inserted between Orgrim's legs, parting outwards, forcing Orgrim to be unable to exert any force. Orgrim couldn't make a move, and he didn't waste any time. He grabbed Garp's suit with his backhand, and with the other hand, he accurately grabbed Garp's wrist before his left hook hit his head. Then, lowering his waist, he ducked under Garp's armpit. Hateful, Garp seemed to react and cursed. But this time, because he was too close to Orgrim, he really couldn't break away or avoid it. Using both hands at the same time, he grabbed Garp's wrist with one hand and the suit around Garp's waist with the other. With a stomp of his feet, Orgrim lifted Garp up in an instant. After briefly staying in the air for a moment, Orgrim saw a strong evil spirit in his eyes and slammed Garp to the ground. It was like a sledgehammer hitting him. Garp had no choice but to instinctively cover his whole body with arm-domineering energy. The next moment, he felt a shock all over his body, and his whole body was smashed to the ground by Orgrim, causing gravel to fly everywhere. The force of the countershock shook Garp's nose, which had been broken by Orgrim, and 2 streams of blood spurted out again. After knocking down, it is generally very effective to quickly hit the target. But Orgrim was under siege at this time, and just when he was about to give Garp 2 more blows, a dark shadow flashed out of the corner of his eye. His arms reached his ears at an extremely fast speed, and sure enough, the powerful kick force instantly covered him, causing Orgrim to stagger again. It's Jun's high whip. After kicking Orgrim away, Jun unleashed all her rabbit-like speed. It was obvious that the distance between the two was only one body, but just like that, she also pulled out a residual. You can imagine how fast the shadow comes. It was so close that Orgrim's staggering steps didn't even hit the ground. There was no fist, but a palm, punched from the bottom up. Jun's palm slid down Orgrim's chest and pressed directly on his chin. Orgrim's hand flashed with a look of shock and anger, and before he could fight back or dodge, the powerful energy in his palm burst out instantly. At the same time, there was also a biting cold air that blew Orgrim away. The slightly messy beard was frozen, and the tips of the hair around the ears were covered with frosty white. But as soon as the ice crystals and frost white appeared, they were directly shaken away by the energy. The chin has always been one of the key points of the human body, and this is where the uppercut comes from. It specializes in this area, and can often knock people unconscious with a powerful blow, and even kill many of them. After receiving Jun's swift blow, Orgrim's head sank, his eyes turned black, and for a moment, he felt like he couldn't see anything. Normally, even the top masters would lose resistance for a moment after taking this blow. Jun, what I want to capture is this moment. At the moment when Orgrim's head was raised back by her bottom-up blow, Jun's other hand was like a finger gun, directed towards Orgrim's open throat. Interjected. This moment can be called the moment of life and death. But Jun never expected that Orgrim would use his will to resist his instinct. His eyes were obviously still a little white, but when Jun's finger was about to pierce Orgrim's throat, Orgrim suddenly lowered his head. The chin was firmly attached to the collarbone, and Jun's fingers were caught in the middle. The nails had already scratched some of Orgrim's skin, and the bright red blood beads along the nails, dyeing Jun's fingers red. At this time, Orgrim's sight has still not recovered. If you look closely, you can still see that his eyes remain in the white state after being exposed to excessive force. But the strong willpower abruptly pulled his scattered thoughts back, and at the same time, his body instinctively fought back. It's really instinct, because Orgrim's counterattack is really too much. If it weren't for instinct, he might use this move against Garp, he might use this move against Sengoku, but he would never use this move against Jun. He stepped forward and stepped directly on the gap between Jun's feet. At the same time, he struck upward with a knee. Normally, this blow should be called the egg-breaking blow. Although Jun was not carrying an egg, this blow made her face turn red instantly, her waist involuntarily bent forward, and her head seemed to be hanging to the height of Orgrim's chest. Pain, not just for men, in fact, women also experience severe pain. That's not all. As a top master, Orgrim's instincts are extremely powerful. At the same time that Jun was beaten and bent over, Orgrim gave a backhand elbow and swept out. As if it was precisely calculated, an elbow hit the side of Jun's head that had just been lowered. The powerful elbow hit actually knocked Jun away. This time, after Jun landed, he rolled twice, and there was no movement for a while. It's no wonder that Orgrim's two powerful blows all hit Jun's vital points, and he was knocked unconscious. After 3 or 5 breaths, he finally came back to his senses and struggled to get back to his senses. The way he climbed up. As soon as we landed in Jun, a few of the big guys who were observing this area felt a chill in their hearts. Damn it, Orgrim is too cruel. Aren't there rumors that he has a very close relationship with Jun? Why did these two people start a fight? It was unambiguous that Jun wanted to crush Orgrim's throat directly. It was a completely fatal attack. Orgrim's series of counterattacks made the masters from all walks of life feel a little painful. Cruel, so cruel, these two are truly top-notch ruthless people, explaining what it means to truly love and kill each other. At the same time, at the moment when Jun fell to the ground and stopped moving, Orgrim slowly regained his sight, and the thoughts in his head were truly settled. At this moment, he seemed to realize what he had just done instinctively. However, although he felt that this was done to Jun, he felt a little regretful, but if he wanted to regret it, it was impossible to regret it. Just kidding, that dead woman almost stabbed her own throat just now. She showed no mercy at all, right? What's more, this was a battlefield, and Orgrim didn't think that Jun would show mercy to him. He also believed that Jun must also know that he would not show mercy to her either. Feelings are feelings, and positions are positions. The two of them have already set this tone since they had in-depth exchanges in the Golden City. It's too late, but it's soon. Jun at this time before regaining consciousness, Orgrim just barely woke up. But in just a short moment, he knocked down both Garp and Jun with his front and rear hands. It can also be seen that in this kind of competition between top masters, he still has a certain combat advantage. In terms of strength, even if Bairui is indeed much better than veteran top players like Garp and Jun. But it was also at this moment that Orgrim was full of flaws, and there were loopholes all over his body. Therefore, the opportunity was naturally seized. It's not Garp, and it certainly can't be Jun who hasn't gotten up from the ground yet. Not to mention Sengoku, the naval marshal, who was still fighting passionately with Newgate. He was Orgrim's old rival. He had never really fought against him since Impelton, the former admiral of the Navy headquarters, Black Kun Zifa. Zifa was sitting in Sakaski's position before, so he was actually on the execution platform. After the execution platform fell, it seemed as if he was covered in it. Orgrim didn't notice him at first. And Zifa did not launch a fierce attack on Orgrim without saying a word like Jun and Garp. He seemed to be waiting for the opportunity. Now, the time he had been waiting for had arrived. When Orgrim reacted, the huge powered mechanical arm had already grasped his waist from behind him. The power of the sea tower stone definitely affected Orgrim. Even Orgrim had undergone corresponding training and had a high resistance to the sea tower stone. But for a moment, I still felt weak and weak. At the same time, the power of impact cannot be exploded, at least not in terms of awakening power. Then, Zephina's world-leading arm-domineering force locked Orgrim tightly. The mechanical arm clicked and automatically pulled inward, directly pulling Orgrim up. Then, Zepha's aura surged, and for a moment, he seemed to have returned to his peak state as a naval admiral. He first lifted Orgrim up, and then with the help of the huge power of the power arm, he backhanded him. He slammed Orgrim to the ground. The ground instantly shattered. This was the first force, coming from Zepha's physical strength. Then, the power arm that had been shortened inward suddenly burst out again. This was the second wave of power. The two forces moved in tandem, like pile drivers, driving Orgrim into the ground. While bearing these two forces, Orgrim also spit out 2 mouthfuls of old blood. It was only then that he seemed to have regained his strength from the sea tower stone, but before he could use his strength to break free from Zepha's damn mechanical arm, an extremely powerful explosive force erupted from the mechanical arm. Out! Crush! Zepha roared angrily. The attack device in the power arm exploded instantly, and the crushing power was directly vented on Orgrim's body, almost knocking Orgrim away. The blood spurted out like it was free. For a moment, Orgrim felt that this guy Zepha, with this arm, seemed to be stronger than before when he was still intact. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 756. When the power arm used the smashing attack, even the seafloor stone felt faintly burning red. One can imagine how powerful this power is. At the same time, this blow also directly blew Orgrim away from the ground. Zepha, the big boss, was also swept in by the explosion, and was also blown away. In Orgrim's impression, Zepha's power arm did not have the function of exploding. In the original story, when he fought with Porisalino, he just used the power rock thing. Then set off an explosion. This time, the strength of the Navy headquarters has improved. Perhaps it is because the pressure from the pirates is too great. In short, Marshal Sengoku has made different progress in the Navy in all aspects. The same goes for Zepha's power arm. Perhaps because he lost his arm many years earlier than in the story, his power arm is full of technology and has many new functions. It may have been upgraded to several versions. With a bang, Orgrim fell to the ground. The whole person looked extremely embarrassed, and there was a feeling of black smoke coming out of his whole body. There was a large area of scorched black on the back. It was obvious that Zepha had been seriously injured by this sudden blow. On the other side, Boss Zepha was also blown away by the explosion and fell hard to the ground. Fortunately, he himself was somewhat prepared and was not as embarrassed as Orgrim. But he still rolled around on the ground a few times, struggling to get up. Not far away, Garp could reach out and help the old man, but at this time, Garp did not do so. On the contrary, he exerted force under his feet, and like a tiger, he rushed out, aiming directly at Orgrim in the distance. This was an opportunity that really hit Orgrim's chances hard. Garp can't give up no matter what. But at this moment, Newgate roared angrily and slashed out with his sword. The powerful trembling force directly forced the warring States Marshal back. At the same time, he punched with his backhand and swept out through the air. The space instantly collapsed and shattered, and the invisible and trembling power swept out, enveloping the attacking Garp in one breath. The next second, the warring States Marshal also hit Newgate on the shoulder. At this time, Newgate had no time to resist. The shockwave in the warring States Marshal's hand erupted, knocking Newgate away. It has to be said that Newgate is still a person who has a great perspective on the overall situation. He knew very well that he must not let Orgrim fall so suddenly. Even if he could feel it secretly, even if Garp rushed over, Orgrim would not be directly defeated. He knew the strength of that guy best. After all, he fought Orgrim twice with all his strength before he was able to distinguish himself. But at that moment just now, he still chose to protect Orgrim first and give him a breath to breathe. Otherwise, if something happens and Orgrim is directly eliminated, Whitebeard alone will not be able to withstand the surging pressure brought by the navy. After being knocked away, but not in a panic, Newgate flew upside down for a distance, then landed with both feet, crushing some of the ground. Not far away, Orgrim's embarrassed figure was lying there. Cough, Orgrim coughed, and a puff of black smoke came out of his mouth. He doubted whether Zifa really had a power rock in his power arm. The power of this explosion was really beyond his expectation. In other words, at that time, he happened to be affected by the Halostone, and many of his defensive powers were not used. It was like a big explosion in the face. On the other side, Mr. Zifa also struggled to get up from the ground. He immediately pulled out his asthma spray from his arms, stuffed it into his mouth, and dropped it with a chee sound. Only then did his heaving chest slowly calm down. Even though he only hit Orgrim once, this blow was also a blow that gathered all his energy. After the blow, his asthma relapsed directly. Garp and Sengoku both stood beside Zifa in tacit understanding at this time. Jun got up in a daze, his brows furrowed. Apparently, the pain from the blow from Broken Egg had not dissipated, but he also stood beside the warring States Marshal. The four top masters of the Navy did not move. Although the time is not long, there is no doubt that for Orgrim, Newgate, or the four major naval masters headed by Sengoku, the previous battle, which was not long, definitely consumed a lot of energy, and each of them had accumulated some injuries. At this time, the battle briefly changed, just like the intermission. No one was impatient to take action again. They were all seizing the time to adjust their status. "Can you still stand up?" a slightly teasing voice came to Orgrim's ears. Seeing my eldest brother being bombed like this, and still having the nerve to make sarcastic remarks, "Why don't you come and help me?" Orgrim spat out a mouthful of blood and said very unhappy. "Beckman, this guy also sneaked over here at some point and was standing next to Orgrim, looking at Orgrim with a smile." "Where's Orgrim?" Even though he complained that Beckman didn't even know how to help him, Orgrim didn't really need anyone's help. Holding back the pain all over his body, Orgrim slowly stood up. The powerful self-healing power was running crazily at this time. It was vaguely visible that some of the injuries on his body had begun to recover. For example, the bridge of his nose that was first broken by Garp's punch. Another example is the small wound on the throat that was punctured by Jun not long ago. As for the charred black behind, and the bloody flesh, you can also see the muscles surging, constantly squeezing out the charred dead meat. Like if a person with Grimm's physical fitness cannot directly defeat him in one breath, it will be difficult to defeat him in a real sense. Newgate looked at Orgrim's unparalleled physical fitness and said with some emotion, "Now carefully think about it, I either lost to someone else or to your exaggerated body. If I had your qualities, it would really not be your turn to be the strongest." Orgrim patted the dust and stains on his body, curled his lips and said without looking back, "You can pull it down. The reason why I can become the strongest is because of another ability. It's a shame that the sky is not here yet, hey, otherwise I could pin the four of them to the ground and beat them up, do you believe it? Cool la 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 la, I really hope to see this scene." Newgate laughed. He moved his shoulders and felt the pain in his body gradually dissipate. Only then did Orgrim look at the Navy again. "Even though it's 3 versus 4, I feel like we have a better chance of winning," Orgrim spoke softly. "What are you waiting for?" Newgate grinned and said with a smile. As soon as he finished speaking, Newgate exerted force on his feet, and the figure rushed out directly. The rich trembling power continued to spread from his body. On the other side of the Navy, Marshal of the Warring States period, he took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Go all out." As soon as he finished speaking, the Grand Marshal took the lead and was the first to rush towards Newgate. He punched out, blocking Newgate's explosive trembling power, and then the golden light Buddha emerged from behind the card. Pu punched Newgate's chest. Before Garp could land his fist, a purple aura suddenly appeared, and thick venom was like a dragon, biting at Garp. It was Baker. Man. Garp's face changed. It's true that Beckman rarely takes action, but his poisonous fruit has always been an ability that most masters are afraid of. At the beginning, this fruit was escorted by him, Garp. Now, he is asked to suffer this pain. Is it really God's will to drink and peck? Although Garp feels that he is very strong, he has absolutely no idea of experience the power of the poisonous fruit. Without saying a word, the domineering energy wrapped around his body directly. It was still the second stage of domineering energy. The invisible power penetrated the body and formed a protective layer outside the body. But there was no need for him to do this. Before the venom could fall on him, Marshal Warring States' big golden palm slapped the poisonous dragon on the face, beating the poisonous dragon to pieces. What's even more surprising is that even if he directly came into contact with Beckman's venom, Warring States the Marshal didn't seem to have anything wrong at all. His palms were still golden. Perhaps this is one of his Phantom Beast abilities, the Golden Buddha, invulnerable to all poisons. In fact, as far as the appearance of his ability is concerned, on the surface, there is also a feeling of avoiding all kinds of evil, as if he is particularly restrained by these seemingly evil abilities. This is the first time Beckman has encountered such a ruthless person. In his memory, when he was first in the Chambord Islands, General Wren's Warring States period didn't seem to have such a feeling of being invulnerable to all poisons. Could it be that it was an ability specially developed for himself? Before Beckman could think anything more, Orgrim's figure had already seized this opportunity. Stuck in front of Garp's face. Before, Garp attacked Newgate in an offensive state, but as soon as the poisonous dragon came out, Garp instantly turned to defensive. Therefore, when Orgrim came over, Garp Pu couldn't find a chance to fight back. The huge fist, packed with tyrannical impact and domineering force, hit Garp's chest with one punch. The powerful force directly knocked Garp away. With this, at the same time, he turned his fist into an elbow and struck a swift and violent blow directly on the belly of Marshal Warring States. Like a bell, the elbow hit him, and a powerful impact erupted, but Marshal Warring States' Golden Buddha, defense with excellent strength, he withstood Orgrim's blow. The Kong Yunkai in Newgate's hand did not hesitate, and the knife fell directly on Sengoku's head, as if he was going to kill him here. Drink! A shout came, and Jun stepped on the shoulder of the Warring States Marshal. The Jinpura in his hand was filled with cold light, and he accurately blocked Newgate's slashing attack. At the same moment, the figure of Zifa, he also came closer, hit Newgate's chest with the power arm, and roared, "Crush the tornado! Get out of here!" Orgrim roared angrily, and before the blow hit Newgate's chest, he hit the side of Zifa's power arm with his arrogant head. The head iron is a real head iron, and there is no intention to flatter him. This head directly knocked Zifa away. The seven top masters collided with each other in an instant, and then dispersed in an instant, pulling away from each other. Except for Garp, the unlucky guy was knocked out by Orgrim. Except for the punches flying, the others did not suffer any loss. For a moment, it felt like they were evenly matched. This made Orgrim stunned for a moment. He originally thought that even if it was 3 against 4, but with his own strength advantage, he should be able to play a strong role. However, in just a short moment, Orgrim reacted and said in a deep voice, "We can't fight like this. We each fight our own way, and we can better use our advantages come. Obviously, in terms of joint attack skills and tacit understanding, the Navy is better. The reason why they were able to compete with Orgrim and others just now is because of this reason. On the contrary, Orgrim, there is really no tacit understanding in the cooperation with Newgate and Beckman, and it is extremely rubbish. Needless to say, Newgate had never teamed up with Orgrim before to compete with Orgrim for the strongest position. Beckman, according to Mann, in the early years, the two brothers had a tacit understanding of joining forces. However, as Orgrim became more and more powerful, Beckman had no intention of taking action, and he was the boss behind the scenes in Avalon all day long. Although the relationship between the two parties, they are close, but when it comes to fighting, there is still a gap. This in and out, and the tacit understanding of the combined attack skills of the Navy, instantly widened the gap. Rather than doing this, it is better to each fight his own way, like just now. At least in that case, Orgrim felt they had the advantage. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 757. Orgrim fell, and Newgate and Beckman also reacted. Indeed, it is not in line with the style of pirates for them to fight like this. The three of them dispersed without saying a word. Orgrim took the lead and killed them directly. Logically speaking, he would have the greatest advantage in fighting warring states, the naval marshal. But he did not go to the warring states period. Because it was obvious that Marshal Sengoku had no intention of taking action against Orgrim, and the Navy's tactics were to avoid such restraint. So Orgrim rushed towards Jun, Garp, and Zifa. Newgate didn't care so much and was still staring at the naval marshal Senguo. Beckman was a bit nervous for a while. What an opponent. He thought about it for a while, and finally did not go to help Orgrim. Instead, he joined the battle with the warring states marshal and joined forces with Newgate. When playing 1 against 2, Orgrim looked very strong, knocking down Jun and Garp more than once before. But when playing 1 against 3, the increase in strength brought about by the Navy's combined attack skills and tacit understanding is not the feeling of adding 1 at all. Zifa didn't take many shots, but he was always able to force Orgrim away at critical moments, which greatly alleviated the pressure that Orgrim's powerful offensive put on Garp and Jun. On the contrary, this style of play made Orgrim feel a little uncomfortable. What surprised Orgrim even more was that Zifa's performance was really beyond his expectation. In fact, after the Battle of Impelton, Zifa, the former Navy admiral, directly retreated to the second line. From then on, Orgrim no longer favored Zifa very much, thinking that Zifa has been defeated by his own men. What's more, he also broke an arm. Therefore, in Orgrim's original opinion, Zephyr's strength should decline. What's more, there have long been rumors that Zephyr is in poor health, which is indeed true. Zifa made 2 full-strength attacks before, once knocking Kaido and once knocking Orgrim. Although the record seemed to be very explosive, every time after a full-out blow, Zifa had to take drugs immediately to prevent him from having an asthma attack. This does prove that there is something wrong with Zifa's health. But when they actually fought like this, Orgrim felt how difficult this guy was. Undoubtedly, this old guy's strength is stronger than that in Impelton, and it seems that he is stronger than his power arm that seems to be integrated with him. The power of technology cannot be underestimated. Especially when combined with Zifa, who was not weak at all, it was an eye-opener for Orgrim. As for physical problems, in fact, Zifa has been limited by asthma for so many years. As a pirate, Orgrim had a misunderstanding, and he saw through it only then. That is, the impact of time on the Navy and pirates is completely different. Zifa and Newgate were born in the same year. The two are the same age. In Orgrim's view, there was no doubt that when he was young, Newgate was a physically better person than Zifa and was in the strongest position. But now, Newgate is the one who hangs up the bottle before going out. Talking about the hidden dangers left in the past chaotic wars, Orgrim felt that Zifa was no less serious than Newgate. After all, he had broken one of his arms. But unfortunately, Excluding asthma, Zifa's physical fitness can now be said to be a street away from Newgate. This also really made Orgrim realize the advantages of the Navy compared to pirates. The Navy has an extremely excellent system, especially in medical care. Zifa has been relegated to the second line for so many years, and his body has been maintained very well in the Navy. He is not comparable to Newgate at all. On the contrary, despite the fact that Marco is also a powerful doctor and has that kind of strange ability, in fact, Marco is just a wild man. He is still a pirate at heart. How can he have so much time to study medicine, let alone take care of himself? This resulted in Zifa being able to beat Newgate in a single round of physical condition at this time. It also caused Orgrim to have a big error in judging his strength. A punch entwined with domineering force hit Zifa's power arm hard. Just when Zifa wanted to use this power arm to catch Orgrim, Orgrim lowered his waist, and the thick power arm was close to the tip of his hair and passed over his head. Then, Orgrim stood up suddenly, grabbed Zifa's shoulders, pulled him inward, and raised his knees with a domineering attitude. But it was also at this moment that a smile appeared on Zifa's face. He moved his foot and stepped on Orgrim's foot, suppressing Orgrim's movement of lifting his leg. "We haven't fought against each other for many years, Orgrim." Zephyr suddenly spoke. There was a hint of surprise in Orgrim's eyes, but he responded, "It must have been almost 20 years. "That's right, but I often observe your information and videos. When you fought against Jun and Garp just now, I noticed something." As Zifa spoke, he leaned in front of Orgrim and pressed his shoulders against him. At the same time, Orgrim also made the same move as Zifa. The two of them immediately put their shoulders together, one on the left and the other on the right. Then, with a twist of his waist at the same time, a burst of energy burst out from bottom to top, exploding along his shoulders. A muffled sound erupted from the shoulders of the two men. This powerful reverberation caused Zifa and Orgrim to take a step back. "Sure enough, you guys have learned my skills." Zifa had a look in his eyes, and he said in a deep voice. Vaguely, you could still see some surprise in his eyes. It was the kind of surprise where the suspicion was confirmed. Of course he was surprised. He and Ao, there weren't many fights between Grim and the one on the Chambord Islands, but Orgrim was just a younger brother at that time, and it was impossible to learn anything. He almost lost his life. Imperial was the real duel. He lost. Since then, he has never played against Orgrim again. In other words, if his conjecture is confirmed, it means that after only one actual encounter, Orgrim learned his fighting skills and techniques. Isn't this talent too scary? Not to mention, it is really like that, but that's it. Orgrim was indeed in the battle at Imperial. He learned a lot from Zifa, which greatly increased his strength. After that, he also thought about secretly learning other people's skills and techniques like this. But it was of no use. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was inspiration. Suddenly. In short, he only found this feeling and learned things from Zifa. None of the other powerful enemies have ever experienced this. That's right, speaking of it, I really should call you Teacher Zifa. Orgrim didn't quibble and admitted it directly. With a touch of regret and helplessness in Zifa's eyes, he said solemnly, "From this point of view, you are indeed the most talented person I have ever seen. It is a pity to be with him. Sorry, if you're in the Navy. It is not a pity or regret at all. I am not suitable for the Navy. If I were a Navy, I may not be as strong as I am today," Orgrim directly interrupted Zifa. While the two were talking, their movements did not stop. Zifa punched Orgrim's ear, and the strong wind pressed the ends of Orgrim's hair. Veneers. At the same time, he said, "You're right, there's nothing to regret." Orgrim hit Zifa's arm with a backhand, trying to push his arm away, but at this moment, Zifa suddenly changed his move, flipped his big hand, and grabbed Orgrim directly from the back of the head. "Muse hair, pulled Orgrim's head toward him, pressed down at the same time, and raised his knees. It seemed that pressing down on Orgrim's head was like a knee strike. Sure enough, in terms of close combat skills alone, even if Zifa broke an arm, Orgrim was still no match for him. But strength is not calculated like this. The moment Orgrim's head was pressed down, Orgrim exerted force on his feet and put his arms directly around Zifa's waist. As he moved forward, Zifa's knee strike missed on the spot. Instead of hitting Orgrim's head, it hit Orgrim's chest directly. At the same time, Orgrim picked up Zephyr and threw him on his back with a strong impact, knocking him to the ground. The next moment, Orgrim twisted his waist, kicked his feet backwards, and kicked Garp's fist. A flash of scarlet color flashed in his eyes, and Orgrim's chest suddenly swelled. Garp's expression changed, his body was instantly covered with domineering energy, and he wanted to distance himself. But the next second, Orgrim breathed out and sprayed out. The roar of the Dragon King. Powerful impact distance exploded close to Garp, and the Navy veteran was directly blown away by the force of the impact, vomiting blood. As soon as this breath fell, a cold light suddenly appeared, and Orgrim felt a pain in his chest. A 1-meter-long knife cut open directly on his chest, and blood spurted out. He didn't pay attention to the injury. With a glance from the corner of his eye, he could see the extremely fast figure of Jun, swiping Jinpura backwards from her side. She herself seemed to be about to miss Orgrim. And passed. This is a cutting technique commonly used by swordsmen. With one strike, you will be in front of you, but the swordsman is already behind you. The key is to be fast, accurate and ruthless. But Orgrim concentrated all his energy at this moment. At the moment when Jun was about to pass him by, he suddenly raised his arm and hung out. Thunder plow hot knife, Orgrim roared angrily. Powerful power burst out from his arm, and at the same time, the incision on his chest was stretched even wider, causing blood to flow. But this blow also caught Jun by surprise. After all, he was stabbed. Although his counter-attack was quick, it was a bit hasty after all. He failed to accurately hit the real thunder plow hot knife, and focused his attack on the neck. With this blow, Orgrim his arms were only hung on Jun's chest. It was almost as if Jun's proud figure was exploded. Through the softness, Orgrim felt the slight movement of the ribs in her chest breaking. Next in an instant, Jun vomited blood and was directly knocked away by Orgrim's blow. The famous sword Kimbira in his hand fell to the ground. At the same time, this guy Zifa held up with one hand on the ground. Just as he was about to get up, as soon as he raised his head, he saw a huge fist and hit it down. Boom! With a punch, the injury on Orgrim's chest became more serious, and blood spurted out. However, this blow also directly knocked Zifa to the ground. He rolled around for more than 10 times, making him dizzy for a while. Lost combat effectiveness. It wasn't until after this punch that Orgrim looked around majestically, and the strongest courage in the world was immediately revealed. One person fights 3 top masters alone and takes advantage. It's just that strong. At this time, Orgrim seemed to be getting angry, and there was a strong fighting spirit in his chest. He almost couldn't help but want to yell, "Who else?" A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 758. Just before Orgrim almost shouted "Who else?" At that moment, a burning breath fell from the sky. He suddenly looked up and saw a red-hot figure. General Sakaski. The hot magma has an aggressive momentum coming towards you from a long distance away. Orgrim was stunned for a moment. He was not surprised that Sakaski was bold enough to dare to attack him at this time. In fact, in Orgrim's impression, Sakaski has always been a daring person. Obviously among the 3 generals, Kuzan was the first one to fight against him. But in fact, Kuzan only fought against Orgrim once, and the next few times, they only fought side by side. On the other hand, Sakaski is really like a mad dog, always trying to bite him Orgrim to death. Therefore, Orgrim was not surprised at all when Sakaski took action at this time. What surprised him was that didn't Sakaski and Porosalino go to deal with Kaido's guy before? Why did you come back out of nowhere? What about Kaido? What about Porosalino? The domineering energy that he saw and heard was suddenly released, and it spread out of the sea area of Marineford in an instant. Then, Orgrim smiled helplessly. He could feel that outside the battlefield, Porosalino was fighting with the furious Kaido. It has to be said that Kaido is very strong. After all, he is the strongest creature in the sea, land, and air. He has the ability of a dragon-like phantom beast. There are rumors that his ability is the fish fruit, which seems to have been given to him by Charlotte Lingling back then. Orgrim has not talked about these things with Kaido, so he doesn't know whether they are true or false. It's just that it has a nose and eyes. As for the fish fruit, there was indeed one, but Orgrim had never seen it. However, fish fruits do appear in the Devil Fruit illustrated book. Generally speaking, Kaido's strength is explosive. Judging from his current state, he is even stronger than Whitebeard. But Porosalino is not someone who is easy to bully. In the original story, Porosalino was very confident and wanted to go to Wano to cause trouble. At that time, Generalissimo Sakaski stopped him, but the reason was not because of Porosalino's strength, but because Wano had so-called unknown forces. The most important thing was that Wano was not an ally China and the Navy legally have no law enforcement rights there. So Porosalino did not go in the end, but it can still be seen that at that time, Porosalino was very confident in his own strength, and he was not at all in vain of Kaido and Charlotte Lingling. In fact, this is indeed the case. Among other things, Porosalino's ability to shine the fruit is so powerful that it can make him look proud of most top experts. This ability not only gives him the first move advantage, but also makes him invincible. Anyway, whether he can beat me is one thing, but whether you can beat me, Porosalino, is another matter. In the end, even if you can really win, whether you can keep it or not is another matter. In short, the shining fruit of Porosalino can be hit, exploded, fast, and has a wide range. In theory, except for the dark fruit, it has no natural restraint. In the world of pirates, if you really want to find a 55-year-old, it's not Crocodile. It should be him, Porosalino. Especially, in this world, because Orgrim came out of nowhere, all three generals were beaten by him when they were young. Therefore, the strength of Kuzan, Sakaski, and Porosalino are all in this kind of situation. Under pressure, I got a stronger improvement. Porosalino's progress is particularly obvious. He was originally a general who loved fruit abilities. Now, he is also a master who is fully developed and not lame. Even when they teamed up with Sakaski before, they had a clear division of labor with one ADC and one tank, and there was no dispute like Kuzan and Sakaski. They worked together very well, and they were able to overpower Kaido. On the one hand, Kaido was beaten for a long time and was unable to return to the battlefield. Now, for some reason, Sakaski handed Kaido to Porosalino and returned to the battlefield. It's not a big deal, maybe Porosalino can't defeat Kaido, but it's easy to delay him for a while. Hell dog, Sakaski fell from the sky, his arm turned into a hot and violent magma dog, and he bit Orgrim in one bite. Although Orgrim was surprised by his appearance, he was full of fighting spirit at this time. To be honest, it is true that he has his own interests in this war. But it is not without lofty pursuits. Any top master who has reached the level of Orgrim, Newgate, and others wants to compete with the world's heroes. A vigorous battle, no matter the outcome, must always end with a hearty fight. Now, Orgrim is full of fighting spirit, and what he is thinking in his heart is this: fight until you are satisfied. So Sakaski fell from the sky. Orgrim was surprised, but also with surprise in his heart. He even felt that it was not enough. Just another Sakaski was not enough for him. He was thinking a lot, but it only took a moment. The Hades attack at the same time as he came, Orgrim stepped hard, and inexplicable energy instantly emerged from his feet. Along his legs, the energy flowed to his body, and he quickly turned into a dragon. At the same time, Orgrim, without moving on the spot, he punched the air with a punch. The surging force of the impact, like a dragon's roar, roared like a dragon's roar at the moment it was released, and hit Sakaski. In a moment, scorching heat, the violent magma, like fireworks, exploded directly in the air. The unparalleled impact shattered Sakaski to pieces. But after countless magma fell to the ground, a powerful momentum suddenly appeared, and Sakaski's figure emerged from the magma condensed out, right next to Orgrim. A fierce punch, with a volcanic explosive power, seemed to ignite the air, and twisted and hit Orgrim's chest. Hide without hiding, Orgrim's eyes flashed with light, and he punched Sakaski's hot magma fist with the same punch. There was a crack. Magma shot out, and a hot feeling came from his fist. In an instant, it was as if Orgrim's arm was scorched by the power of domineering. Sakaski's arm suddenly exploded backwards, blasting out a stream of magma, and then, black smoke came out from behind him. This burst of magma, like a volcano, gave him a very strong additional strength. Drink Sakaski roared angrily. He just used that scorching magma fist to suppress Orgrim's fist. You don't win a fight by speaking loudly, Orgrim cursed angrily, and there was an explosion inside his body. A powerful shockwave erupted directly from his fist. Sakaski's huge magma fist was exploded in an instant. But Sakaski, instead of retreating, he advanced forward, with an extremely fierce look in his eyes, and pressed directly in front of Orgrim. His other hand, filled with domineering energy and magma, hit Orgrim's chest directly. Orgrim didn't even think about it. Without thinking, he hit Sakaski's chest with a backhand. A powerful shockwave instantly exploded on Sakaski's chest. What surprised Orgrim was that he could take the initiative. Sakaski, who was elementalized to avoid the blow, did not choose this way. A blood stain suddenly overflowed from the corner of his mouth, but he still withstood the blow. The next second, the fist of hot and violent magma was swung directly on Orgrim's chest. The armed domineering energy covering his chest was instantly penetrated, just like in the original story of the battle on top, when Sakaski opened a hole in Newgate's chest. This blow also broke Orgrim's defense. Volcanic explosive power and destructiveness were the power that Sakaski was best at using. And Sakaski was originally one of the strongest. In the original in the story, his ability was designated by Oda as the strongest attack power. Although Orgrim did not agree with it very much, it has to be said that Sakaski's attack power is indeed extremely powerful. This blow hit Orgrim. On Grim's chest, the power of hot and violent magma shot out of his body, as if it had scorched all the organs in his body. But this was an illusion. It was indeed a very powerful blow, but it didn't reach this point. To such a degree. As if one successful blow was not enough, in an instant, Sakaski's fists continued to fall, with volcanic explosive force, hitting Orgrim's chest 7 or 8 times in a row. He forcibly hit Orgrim. Orgrim even took a few steps back. From the onlooker's point of view, it seemed as if Orgrim was suppressed by Sakaski. Just when Sakaski was getting more and more aggressive, suddenly, he couldn't take back the fist he punched. Looking again, Orgrim's strong arm was holding Sakaski's fist tightly. Cough, Orgrim coughed lightly, and a line of black smoke came out of his mouth. Then, Orgrim's drooped head lifted up, with a strong evil aura in his eyes and a ferocious smile on his lips. You don't even have the strength to hit someone, but you still claim to be a general, Orgrim said with a ferocious smile. The next moment, he suddenly punched Sakaski on the head with a left hook. Sakaski was just caught by Orgrim. It was just one arm and was not really restrained. Therefore, at the moment Orgrim punched, Sakaski quickly raised his other arm and blocked it directly on the side of his head. Boom! A muffled sound. Orgrim punched Sakaski on the arm. The powerful force directly pressed his arm and hit the side of his face, exploding a piece of magma. Sakaski blocked this blow, but at the same time, the powerful force also made him stagger. As if waiting for this stagger, the moment Sakaski's lower body became unstable, Orgrim's arm suddenly exerted force, grabbed Sakaski's hand, and gave him a hard blow. He pulled it and clamped it directly under his arm. The two of them were close to each other, and Orgrim, with a ferocious look in his eyes, slammed his head directly into Sakaski's head. After this head-on collision, it was unclear whether Sakaski was guarding Orgrim, but his arm that was originally blocking his face was knocked away. The next second, a huge fist punched Sakaski's face hard. The blow caused Sakaski's body to flutter outward, and part of his arm that was trapped under Orgrim's armpit was freed. Before Sakaski could fight back or respond, another powerful punch landed, and a piece of lava exploded on Sakaski's head, and even blood stains flew out. At the same time, Orgrim grabbed Sakaski's arm before and grabbed Sakaski's neck. Following the force of the fist, he pressed down in the direction where Sakaski fell, and directly pushed Sakaski to the ground. At this time, Orgrim was hunched over, holding Sakaski's neck on the ground with one hand, and raising the other hand high. Sakaski's body was covered with hot lava, and Orgrim's palms were burned with black marks, but he still did not let go, and punched Sakaski again, hitting Sakaski's face. I cried. This blow hit Sakaski on the bridge of the nose, just like Orgrim was beaten to tears by Garp, and he beat Garp to cry again. At this time, Sakaski was beaten by Orgrim. The punches also shed blood and tears. The extremely ferocious Orgrim didn't even care that many parts of his body were blackened and scorched by the magma. He seemed to want to blow off Sakaski's dog's head here with one breath, and punched him again. With domineering attitude, he hit Sakaski in the face. Boom! Blood and lava splashed everywhere. At this time, many people were shocked. Sakaski dropped from the sky and used a set of combos to hit Orgrim. His body was extremely charred, as if he had suppressed Orgrim. How come in the blink of an eye, it was Orgrim who was squeezing the Admiral's neck with one hand, and pushing the Admiral to the ground with the other hand and hitting him on the head with a hammer. And this style of play is really cruel. There was a transparent impact on his fist, and Orgrim's eyes were full of murderous intent. He punched Sakaski on the head again. At this time, he held Sakaski's neck with domineering force in his hand. Sakaski couldn't elementalize even if he wanted to. In the previous few punches, Sakaski relied on the strength of his bones and wanted to rely on the lava to burn Orgrim to death. It turned out that Orgrim's bones were even harder than his. Even if he was burned to death, I also want to blow his head off with a lot of momentum and keep punching him. This time, Sakaski felt that he really couldn't bear it anymore and decisively chose to give in. The ground was directly boiled by the magma. Orgrim only felt a light touch in his hand. Sakaski instantly broke away from his grasp and sank down into the ground transformed by the magma. The next second, Orgrim punched the magma, causing sparks to fly. Bah, don't you like this kind of head-on fighting style? Why run? Orgrim spat a mouthful of bloody saliva into the magma and said with great disdain. Isn't there anyone in the Navy headquarters who can fight? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 759. In the original story, due to some arrangements made by the warring states marshal, for example, the early execution of Ace cannot be seen by the outside world casually, and it will easily affect the image of the Navy. Therefore, the live broadcast was interrupted halfway through the battle on top. We still have to wait until this guy Bucky secretly does a private photo shoot. But this time it was different. This time, the Navy had a mentality of showing off its power, and even this execution was just a side dish and a pretext. You see, when the Generalissimo gave his speech, he did not mention anything about execution or not. Every word is a declaration of war. Just want to fuck the fucking pirate. Therefore, the live broadcast was not interrupted due to the collapse of the execution platform. At this time, the entire war was still being broadcast live. And Orgrim, as the central figure in the war, was naturally filmed throughout. In the past, everyone in the world knew that Orgrim was very strong, but in what way and how strong it was, most people didn't know. After all, in the previous war, Orgrim started fighting with others, but there was no live broadcast. It's amazing that there is footage of the Navy sneaking around, but it won't get out. The most intuitive propaganda is the news of the world. After the battle, it will be announced who Orgrim defeated so and so, reflecting his power. But this kind of newspaper, how can it have the excitement of live broadcast? Now, the whole world has truly seen the power of this king of the night. The naval hero Garp is a veteran naval powerhouse who has traveled all over the world for decades, and the same goes for the Navy headquarters Grand Inspector Mamoto Jun. And former Admiral Zifa. And current Admiral Sakaski. Which of these four people is not famous? But even so, all four of them were defeated by Orgrim, and Orgrim defeated the four of them with 1-4. What is the strongest in the world? The overwhelming power displayed by Orgrim at this time is truly the strongest in the world. On the contrary, it seems that Whitebeard, the former strongest, did not show the overwhelming power that he should have had as the strongest before. But many people can understand it. After all, the Generalissimo of the Warring States period is not weak in strength. He is one of the top masters on the sea. Secondly, Whitebeard is indeed in poor physical condition. He is an old guy. We can't expect him to be strong from beginning to end for the rest of his life, right? In short, as Orgrim defeated the four top masters of the Navy in one fell swoop, the whole world felt the pressure from this pirate overlord. Although he lives in the New World, he lives in Marineford. But the strong pressure he brought hangs over the entire world. If the so-called strongest pirate wins this war, perhaps the era of great pirates will be pushed to a new level, and the world will become more chaotic and brutal, right? This is the deterrent power of pirates. The evil party is in power. Although no order was issued, with the appearance of Orgrim in Marineford, the Navy headquarters front has been steadily retreating. On the glacier, there were not many people fighting at this time. The Navy who were still fighting now had not had time to evacuate and would be devoured by the pirates sooner or later. A large number of naval forces have withdrawn into Marineford. At the same time, a large number of pirates also poured in and moved the battlefield known as the Meat Grinder to Marineford. Maybe it's a tacit understanding, or maybe both parties have concerns. The combat effectiveness of the middle and lower levels is still fighting feverishly. However, some of the elite generals of the Cotters and Navy had stopped their respective actions at this time, and gradually formed a confrontation front headed by Orgrim and Marshal Sengoku. The battle between the Generalissimo and Whitebeard also gradually stopped. In front of the ruins of the execution platform, both sides laid out their carriages and horses, wary of each other. "Old guy, what's going on? I've already killed 4 of them here, but you didn't even win the Warring States period." Orgrim pulled out his doom hammer from the ruins, put it on his shoulder, and said with a smile. Newgate raised his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, without any pretense, and said very calmly, "If I take the lead, then of course I will do my part. I will use as much strength as I have. However, I am not taking the lead this time. With a bastard like you Orgrim standing in front of you, I can just say what I want. You don't really want me, an old man, to fight my best here, do you? It will kill people. Although Newgate is not afraid of death, in other words, pirates at their level will not lack the courage to fight. Those who dare not fight will have died midway, unable to reach their level. But Newgate doesn't want to die either. In the original war, he had no choice. If he didn't leave behind, none of his Whitebeard pirates would be able to escape. For the sake of his sons, he, the father, was willing to stay and die. At that time, Newgate went all out and unleashed all the last strength in his life. But now, if Orgrim had not appeared, he might still consider it. From the moment Orgrim appeared, Newgate had no intention of seeking death. Are you crazy? You, Orgrim, are strong and strong. Just go ahead and don't let me, an old guy, always get ahead. Therefore, when he fought with Marshall of the Warring States period, he actually did not overstress himself, and fought to a level that was still within his tolerance. Are there times when you are greedy for life and afraid of death? Orgrim laughed. Why do I have to take the dead end when there is a way to survive? Just to make you assholes happy, Newgate said mockingly. Gee ha 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 ha, you have really changed, you have changed too much, you were not like this before. Orgrim laughed and joked. Newgate's eyes also brought some memories, and then he shook his head and said, it's good to have you here. You helped me remove this man named the strongest. I can relax a lot about myself. Before the battle for kingship came to an end, Newgate had a very tough temper and a domineering air in his work. He was so stubborn that no one took him seriously. But after Orgrim defeated him, Newgate changed greatly. They silently accepted the Warhammer pirates' squeeze on their territory, not to mention being at the forefront of the navy. After Teach's accident, Newgate was able to bow his head. Now, on the battlefield, I have learned to pass the blame to Orgrim, and I will never force myself to fight. I have to say that he is becoming more and more savvy as he lives. Fine. While Orgrim and Newgate were chatting here, the surrounding cotters such as Sphinx, Hancock, and Barrett also came over. However, my hawk did not stop. He was still fighting Shanks at this time, and the two were still fighting on the glacier behind him. On the other side, the Navy generals gradually gathered together. Sakaski crawled out from under the ground with his face covered in blood. Hot magma was flowing all over his body. He was full of murderous intent, but he looked a little embarrassed. This guy is really stubborn to a certain extent. A long time ago, whether it was the Navy or experts from all walks of life, there was a consensus. That is, when fighting Orgrim, if you don't have the confidence to overpower him, it's best not to choose a head-on fight. You see, none of Kuzan, Zifa, Garp, Porosalino, Jun, Sengoku, and others are willing to go head-to-head with Orgrim. The Generalissimo of the Warring States period had no intention of taking action against Orgrim from the beginning. Garp and others also used a rogue style of play before, and Orgrim was seriously injured when they beat him arbitrarily. Only Sakaski, from the first time Orgrim fought against him to just now, Sakaski has never failed to show his confidence. Regardless of whether I can beat him or not, whether it's tough or not, anyway, I, Sakaski, want to be tough and fight head-on. Result, it was during the head-to-head confrontation that Orgrim gave him a hard fight. Sakaski's face was covered in blood, and Zifa, the Navy veteran, was also quite free and easy. He sat down on the ruins, holding an asthma spray in his hand, stuffing it in his mouth, and taking a big breath. The heaving chest gradually calmed down. He was not seriously injured, he was just knocked unconscious by Orgrim. There was a swelling on his head and he was a little dizzy. He had asthma again, so he lost his fighting ability just now. Now, it's actually better. Garp was in a much worse situation. His nose was broken and his face was also covered in blood. He took Orgrim's Dragon King's roar and actually received it with his face. His clothes were torn all over and he was in an extremely embarrassed state. As for the injuries, It was hard to tell whether he was holding on or if there was really nothing wrong with him, but his momentum had indeed declined a lot. On the other side of Jun, they were staring at Ogre with their eyes filled with hatred. Damn it, that bastard Orgrim was so mean. His chest was almost exploded, and he even received a knee strike that would end his descendants. Can Jun not be ashamed and angry? I wish I could tear Orgrim alive right here. At the same time, Kyuzan, Fujitora Yuxiao, Chief Staff Officer Ahe Chadukake and other senior Navy generals also appeared beside Marshal Sengoku. Even Bartholomew Bear retreated. The battlefield was still noisy, with constant killing cries. But at this time, the confrontation between the top combat forces of both sides seemed much quieter. Orgrim had the upper hand, so he chatted and laughed with Newgate. Marshal Warring States and others looked very stressed. I know that Orgrim is very strong, but it's daytime at this time. Even in the daytime, this kind of confrontation cannot suppress Orgrim. Thinking of this, looking at the sky, the sun has begun to go downhill. Once it gets dark, who can control Orgrim, this ferocious beast in the night? He can fight 4 now, but after dark, he might have to fight 10? Marshal Sengoku is now suffering from toothache. He has obviously had a high estimate of Orgrim, but Orgrim still completely broke the Navy's overestimation of him. Before Orgrim, top players were equally strong and weak. But the gap between the two sides cannot be too obvious. To give a simple example, take Kaido and Charlotte Lingling. Perhaps one-on-one, they are slightly stronger than the Navy generals. But it's just a front line. It is a fact that no one can defeat 2 admirals at the same time. Not even the Yonko. Only Orgrim's appearance in the night is special. Therefore, the Warring States Marshal overestimated Orgrim as much as possible, and wanted to take down Orgrim in the shortest time with 4 top masters with 4 times the combat power advantage during the day. The result was good. Orgrim really gave them a surprise, 1 beat 4 of them, and he actually won? At this time, the Warring States Marshal sat on the wax. At this time, it seems that he has fallen into a state of helplessness. In the face of Orgrim's absolute strength, he didn't know how to defeat Orgrim. Therefore, the Navy is under great pressure. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 760. After chatting with Newgate for a few words, Orgrim twisted his neck slightly, walked forward in 2 steps, and faced the Navy bosses. He was already tall and looked very strong. At this time, there were wounds of various sizes on his body, and they were still healing, which made him look particularly ferocious. Coupled with the power of defeating 4 top Navy masters in one go. Orgrim took these 2 steps, and the Navy felt strong pressure. Even the Marshal of the Warring States period could not help but tighten his fists and be on guard. Warring States, Orgrim called out in a deep voice. Marshal Warring States frowned slightly, as if he knew that Orgrim was coming to negotiate terms. He waved his hand to Senior Staff Officer Ahe behind him, and Senior Staff Officer Ahe also immediately he understood what was happening. He took 2 steps back and stood behind Bartholomew Bear's tall body, covering his figure. Then he took out the phone and gave a few instructions. After a while, the live broadcast was going on. All the phone bugs went out of business. This time, the live broadcast about Marineford, the battle at the top of the New World, stopped immediately. Audiences around the world were confused. But the Warring States Marshal didn't care about the audience's feelings. When Orgrim saw this, he grinned and smiled. Although Warring States did not respond, this action already showed some attitude. He has worries. However, Orgrim can also understand that the Navy it would be wrong and unbelievable if Sengoku really held the Navy and fought with him until death, and it would be unbelievable. In the original story, the general of Sengoku also resisted the pressure and took advantage of the situation to stop the continuation of the war. there was no they really went after the Whitebeard pirates to evacuate, not to mention a full-scale war with the red-haired pirates. The reason is the same. The Navy can lose, but it must not be in a mess. People with big business, 1 or 2 wins or losses, at most. It is not like the Navy has never lost in the past few hundred years in determining the world pattern and direction in the next 20 to 30 years. Ups and downs, nothing else. Warring States period, are we old friends too? Orgrim said softly. Marshal Warring States frowned and said, I never make friends with pirates. Orgrim glanced at Bartholomew Bear on the side after hearing this, with a strange look in his eyes. Marshal Warring States' face stiffened slightly. Can this be called a friend? This is a good helper for the Navy. Not just friends, but also old rivals, right? Ever since I went to sea, I have been competing with you. The world is so big, and I, Orgrim, have many enemies. Orgrim spoke in a low and slow tone. When he said this, he turned to look at Newgate, paused for a moment, and then continued, but you are the only one who is different. In my heart and in my eyes, you are all different. In the Warring States period, is the most difficult opponent I have ever encountered. Therefore, I have always regarded you as my lifelong enemy and my fateful opponent. While I hate you, I also admire you. Orgrim does have many opponents and enemies. Shanks, Roger, Newgate, Charlotte Lingling and the like, these are all difficult opponents he has encountered in his life. There are more others whose names are not obvious. Especially among the Navy, Cusin, Jun, Porisalino and Sakaski are all. But only the Warring States period is special. He indeed regarded the Warring States Generalissimo as his lifelong enemy and old enemy. At the same time, he had to admire the Warring States Marshal's skill, strategy, strength, and vision, which were all quite extraordinary. He is the one with the strongest comprehensive strength and level among the enemies he has ever seen. To be honest, Orgrim asked himself, if he didn't have the so-called extraordinary vision, he could see many futures and stories that ordinary people could not see. Just relying on his own level and ability, he competed with Warring States openly and covertly. He is really no match for the Warring States Marshal. I guess I have been played to death by this guy many times. The reason why the Warring States Marshal appears weak and passive compared to him, Orgrim, is not because the Warring States Marshal himself has problems, but because Orgrim is cheating. How glorious would the Warring States period be without Orgrim? In fact, this is indeed the case. In the original story, the Warring States Marshal really brought about earth-shaking changes to the Navy. Even before retiring, he destroyed the Whitebeard pirates in one fell swoop. Isn't this awesome enough? The Warring States Marshal felt a little emotional when he heard Orgrim's words. Warring States had encountered many difficult opponents in his life, including Roger, Whitebeard, and Shiki. But among these people, the one he found most difficult to deal with was also the bastard Orgrim. Failing to eradicate him when he was weak was the thing that Sengoku regretted most in his life. Orgrim said that he admired Sengoku, the naval marshal. But in fact, putting aside the standpoint of justice, the Warring States Marshal could not help but sigh and admire Orgrim in the dead of night. He didn't know that Orgrim was the one who cheated. Naturally, he will not consider these factors. From his point of view, Orgrim is really a reckless hero. Fighting out from the remote town of Ogalan in Bihai, he killed many people along the way and made a huge fortune. As for the Marshal of the Warring States period, it was not like he had never seen such a person before. There are not a few reckless people like Orgrim who have been killed. But he is the only one who can really establish himself like Orgrim. He came from a humble background, but he came from the lowest level, but in Orgrim, he never saw the kind of short-sightedness that he should have from beginning to end. More orders. Surprisingly, Orgrim dealt with this sudden rise quite well, without feeling like a nouveau riche. Later he thought about it, maybe it was because Shiji taught well. But no matter what, Orgrim is indeed the most difficult and unique opponent he has ever encountered. Asking himself, he felt that even if he were in Orgrim's position, he might not be able to reach this point in 30 years and create a new world of pirates that belongs to him, Orgrim. Therefore, when it comes to hatred, Marshal of the Warring States period certainly wants Orgrim to die. He must die quickly. It would be best to die suddenly on the spot now. However, when it comes to admiration, the Navy Marshal does not have any admiration for this pirate hero. However, these are all covered up under the light of justice. Thinking of this, the Warring States Marshal's expression softened slightly, and he said in a deep voice, "A lifelong enemy. I am proud enough to be treated like this by you, Orgrim." "Yes, you can indeed be proud," Orgrim smiled and said. The Warring States Marshal's face froze again when he said this. "Damn, how can I take this?" But Orgrim didn't mean to let him take it, and he just took care of himself. He continued, "In the early years, I often caused trouble for your navy. That's because I need these as qualifications, as bargaining chips, and as nourishment." Not only the Warring States Marshal, but some of the big guys behind him also had a look of reminiscence in their eyes. It's true. When was the period when Orgrim most embarrassed the navy? It was when he just went to sea. This stage of becoming the boss of Avalon. That was the period when he was most active, and he was also a real troublemaker, adding countless obstacles to the navy. On the contrary, after he became the boss, he was not so troublemaking. It was so aggressive. After all, he had only one life before barefoot. If he wanted to get ahead, he had to sacrifice his life. But later, he became richer and had more choices. There was no need to fight against the navy. Then from then on, when Orgrim did things, he looked at interests and nothing else. You should also know later that I am a pirate who abides by the rules. In the past 20 years, we have all been living in peace, right? Orgrim said softly. The Warring States Marshal acquiesced to Orgrim's statement. With a hint of contemplation in his eyes, he asked, "What do you want to say?" "This world is inseparable from the navy and cannot be without pirates. I have no intention of annihilating you. This is unrealistic. My fundamental desire for this war is to destroy your navy's ambition. In the New World, ambition, so Warring States, now give you a chance, an opportunity that is good for both of us. You can't win this war, quit the New World. The New World is a new world for pirates, not a new world for the navy," Orgrim said in a deep voice. As soon as he finished speaking, the faces of many navy generals changed and became murderous. It was also impossible for the Warring States Marshal to agree to such an absurd request from Orgrim. His aura became positive, with a firm look in his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "It's impossible, the navy hasn't lost yet, Orgrim, don't be too proud. Didn't lose." "How do you beat me?" Orgrim said in a sonorous tone, and at the same time, he took a step forward. The majestic aura on his body, like an abyss and an ocean, overwhelmed him at once, instantly covering up the auras of many generals in the navy. Orgrim's eyes were extremely oppressive, scanning the top generals of the navy, and finally, he set his sights on Marshal of the Warring States period. "You and I both know very well that no matter how lively the fighting at the bottom is, it is just the icing on the cake. What can really determine the outcome of a war is always the duel at the top," Orgrim said in a deep voice. "This is the truth. Even though hundreds of thousands of troops from both sides are fighting fiercely now, it looks like a meat grinder. But in fact, the outcome of the war, at least in this world where personal strength is paramount, it is always decided by the duel at the top. The people at the bottom, to put it bluntly, you need to have a sense of participation." Before the navy people could speak, Orgrim smashed the warhammer on his shoulder to the ground, and then said in a very arrogant tone, "You said the navy hasn't lost yet? Then I will give you a chance. Ihasgarot Orgrim is standing here. The navy headquarters must evacuate me from the New World. This is what I say. If any of you object, please stand up and talk to me. Let's see who has more fists. Hard. As soon as Orgrim finished speaking, Sakaski was about to run away, but the warring states marshal held down his shoulders. Is Orgrim trying to fight a group of people? Challenge the top masters of the Navy headquarters? But for some reason, the warring states marshal didn't feel that he was arrogant. However, no matter how you look at it, it all seems too childish. Looking at the gloomy expression of the warring states marshal, Orgrim smiled again and said, "What? One of you beats a group of you, and you don't dare to respond." In fact, Orgrim was not joking. He wanted to weigh him. Take a moment and weigh yourself to see how strong you can be. The masters at the Navy headquarters are a touchstone in his eyes. At the same time, in the Fortress of Justice, Lord Im had a smile in his eyes and said to the bald king next to him, "Go, tell the Marshal of the Navy and promise him."